there's no question we cannot be separate from this universe. Einstein had a friend named Arthur Eddington.
Wow.
And Eddington once said, "You cannot pluck the tiniest petal of a flower without the troubling of a distant star."
Yeah.
And some woman asked, "Why, Lord Eddington, you and poetry?" And he said, "No, madam, science."
If your prayer is not answered, then God is making better plans for you.
I like that.
If your prayers are, if your prayers are getting delayed on what you're asking, then be sure that God is creating something which is way better than what you are asking for.
My name is Megan Nilsson, aka Crypto Megan, coming to you from Hollywood again, where all the magic happens. We have some incredible guests. I'd like to introduce, you guys know him from many, many shows already, the co-founder of Zebu and CMO, Raghav. And I'm actually going to hand off the mic to Raghav to give our special guest the intro he deserves. Raghav, take it away.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you so much. It's not every day that we get this kind of guest on the couch. Like Megan said, we are here in Hollywood. Beautiful place, amazing, guest. So there are times in our life where we kind of fall short of words to introduce the person on the podcast. I think today is one such episode. With me today, I have Doug, and the man who has kind of seen, all the colors, all the shades of life, who has kind of come from being born in a German war camp, in a Nazi war camp, to making a huge dent here in Hollywood. Doug is a very, very accomplished person, someone who has done some of the finest things in the industry that people would ever dream of. He's somebody who has pulled off world's largest concert and show. He's someone who has worked very closely with the Nobel Prize Foundation team. He's someone who has done so many firsts in the world that, probably 4 or 5 decades, people cannot even come close to what he has accomplished. But what is more exciting about this episode is, we kind of, when we met over a lunch yesterday, we started speaking about some of the common interests. And then I got to know that he had just met a spiritual teacher from India, Sri Ravi Shankar, a week before I met him. And then he shared his experience about, talking to him about all the great things that potentially we can do together. And then we spoke about Paramahamsa Yogananda, and I was surprised to know how deeply he is connected and all his spiritual experiments that he has done in his life. So this podcast, unlike all our other podcasts, this episode is not about crypto, Bitcoin, the price that will go up, go down. It's all about, getting very personal with a very accomplished person about his spiritual experiences and things that you have never seen on our show before.
Absolutely. And it all kind of ties in. Before we now hand it off to our spectacular guest, this movement isn't just about financial freedom. It's about a paradigm shift. It's also getting more in touch with who we are as humans, not losing that physical, personal touch, and, going back to the roots and the spirituality of things. This is meant to make our life better as a whole.
Absolutely.
So it's very important to dig right into this topic. So I'm so honored that we could set this up today.
Yeah. So Doug, thank you so much for taking your time, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. So just by a way of background, my name is Doug Ivanovich. I've been, as was stated, I was born in a German war camp. Came to this country when I was small, so I've been pretty Americanized and happy to be here, But became a musician when I was 13 years old and absolutely loved music and did it professionally for many, many years.
Wow.
But it afforded me a lot of time. You can only play music so long or so often, especially as a drummer. Because when I was a child playing drums all the time, everybody wanted to say, "Stop all that noise." But even once we got on further and we were traveling around, it would leave you the better part of a day. And sometimes in between different shows, it would leave a lot of hours.
Yeah.
And some of that we'd spend on music. But for me, I was particularly interested in philosophy and spirituality and comparative religion and, cultures and the arts and so on. And so, it began a journey for me that has been the most fulfilling, rewarding, and really central piece to my life. Everything that I do issues from that spiritual place, that spiritual center within. And so when I got later into media, mass media, television, concerts, different types of businesses, it was always supported by the foundation of universal spirituality that was inclusive of every human being on this planet, virtually every life form on this planet, the singular community of life on this planet, the magnificence, of the earth and her bounty and diversity, and then realizing more and more the universal and cosmic intelligence and consciousness behind all of this. And so I just guess I became thirstier and thirstier because I always wanted to go deeper and deeper and deeper to find out everything I could. So at a certain point I was studying really virtually all the religions, spiritual traditions, ecumenical groups, even some of the hidden esoteric traditions, the initiatic traditions, the shamanistic traditions, and all that, just wanting to get the most complete picture that I could of what it means to be human.
Nice.
And I've come to certain conclusions that are rather interesting because I like pushing the envelope. So I like telling people things that make them think, and I write things that make them think. So I got involved in humanitarian events. We did something called the first Earth Run, Olympics type torch relay.
Wow.
For world peace and human unity in 1984. And it was, the torch made it to the top of Mount Everest.
Wow.
And a women's team took it. Jacques Cousteau put a magnetic fixture on it, took it down to the bottom of the ocean.
Wow.
The Pope held this torch,
Wow.
same torch that we handed off to everybody. And there were 3.5 million people there in Paris at the Arch of Triumph there. And so people paid to carry the torch from place to place. That led to my meeting the right people, being in the right place at the right time. And about a year later, here I was with a media company that I had. It was actually first Conscious Investors, our financial company, capital company. And then secondly, Conscious Media, which was an extension of that company, subsidiary. And we ended up in the right place at the right time. And key members of my team and I ended up putting the Live Aid concert, big parts of it together. It was the biggest concert ever, the biggest broadcast ever.
Yeah.
And raised a couple of billion people and helped to raise hundreds of millions of dollars
That's
in
fantastic.
support of African famine relief at the time. But for me, it was more important that this was like an experiment. How do we learn to do this better and better and then address it to different causes around the world, critical causes, where mass consciousness makes a difference, where we can bring together an enormous number of people in a common, positive, unifying, uplifting experience, and then endeavor to sustain that impulse and mobilize people and so on to help the neediest, to bring us together to solve the world's problems and make the world a better place.
Wow.
So we embarked on that trip, and we're somewhere on that path with a long way to go.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
Beautiful.
incredible. I like what you said, what it means to be human. That could be a title of one of your many incredible books, huh?
I'll have to thank you for that. Maybe I'll have to give her a commission. I never thought of that, but it is a good
It stuck
title.
with me when you
Yeah.
said it. There's
Yeah.
so many different layers and colors
Sure.
to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a few books that I'm working on right now. I call them spiritual outpourings.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Volumes 1 through however many, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, And I've written most of the material. It's just pulling from like 45,000 sayings and quotes and aphorisms and a couple thousand essays. It's not easy to pick the best stuff and, arrange that and format that to a book.
Yeah.
So I'm looking to get some help because doing multiple books will be a challenge. But I've already written most of the material. And so my first book is called Like Lightning from the Heart. And it says, when on that day you finally awaken to the reality and splendor of incomparable divinity, love will leap from you to those around you, like lightning from the heart.
Wow.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And so my second book is called Romancing the Infinite.
Wow.
I like to write a little forward so people don't have to look through all the pages to find
Right.
out what's this about.
Right.
Right up front, there's a little forward. So, Romancing the Infinite, the forward says, romancing the infinite lures the soul out of the depths of hibernation and out into the warm and living light of grand and glorious self-expression, like 1,000 white doves freed from a cavern of darkness.
Wow.
So
Beautiful.
and then Heavenly Gifts is my third book, and what it
Wow.
means to be human may be my next.
That's
book.
got to be
Yeah,
a book,
right?
man.
Yeah.
I mean, you've now lived this full life, and you still got many chapters to go, I'm sure. But synthesizing that into
Sure.
what is it? What does it mean?
Well, I do have some insights, and one that I'll throw at you right away
Yeah.
is that what it means to be human is we are the inverted universe.
Very
We
deep.
cannot be separate from it.
The very highly
very deep.
philosophical
Very deep.
We are
episode
in it,
here.
Yeah.
We are in it. We are of it. We cannot be separate from it, regardless of anything anybody thinks, feels, says, or does. We are an expression of it. We are its eyes, hands, feet, heart, soul, all that.
Here's an exercise. Because you are so philosophical and these thoughts are so deep, and I love this because like I was telling Raghav earlier, I was a lit major. It was one of the things I studied. So novels and all the meaning behind words and things. How would you break that down simply for viewers who are listening? What that means,
Well, we come from somewhere,
Yeah.
and we're here. How do we get here? I'm not just talking about our liquid mineral composite that we call the physical body, but our energy body, our souls, our spirit, our consciousness, all that. This thing that thinks and feels and lives and experiences and expresses and creates and all that. All of us, every aspect of us, or at least most of it, is focused on being here.
Yeah.
And so we got here somehow. Where did we come from?
Yeah.
And how much of what's out there that created us or that we're connected with,
Yeah.
how much of that is still us? So you can look at the universe as billions of galaxies, hundreds of billions, and all the stars and planets and perhaps life forms and so on. I'm counting on the fact they're out there because it would be such a waste of real estate. It would be an incomparable waste of real estate if we're the only
Yeah.
life on Earth and, as some say, intelligent life on Earth.
Yeah.
But there's no question we cannot be separate from this universe. Einstein had a friend named Arthur Eddington.
Wow.
And Eddington once said, "You cannot pluck the tiniest petal of a flower without the troubling of a distant star."
Yeah.
And some woman asked, "Why, Lord Eddington, you and poetry?" And he said, "No, madam, science."
Beautiful.
And so when
Very, very
poetry
profound.
and art and spirituality and science are the same, that's a beautiful thing.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So, just extending on the same thought, right, Doug? I think, we all have great stories to share about our life. One of the very personal things that kind of probably brought in significant change in my life was, coming back to Paramahamsa Yogananda, the books that I read. So, this is a time when I was dating my now wife, but my girlfriend back then. So my wife and her dad, they had a center of self-realization fellowship on the terrace on their house. So when I was dating her, she gave me this book. She introduced me to Paramahamsa Yogananda.
Autobiography of a Yogi.
Yes. So when I I mean, when I started reading the autobiography of Yogi and his second book, which is Divine Romance, there is a beautiful statement. It says, all of us are made in the image of God. And Paramahamsa Yogananda goes on to say, you are made in the image of God and you can do everything that God can do. And he says, and his guru, Yukteswar, Girji says, there are a lot of examples in the book. I mean, you have read it, you know everything about that. But he says anything that you can imagine can be real, and that kind of changed the way I started looking at my life. And till then, I call it my life. Before knowing Paramahamsa Yogananda, and after I read that book, I gave up on the limiting belief. And you won't believe this. I mean, people call it different things. They call it law of manifestation. People call it, law of attraction, prayers, all of that. For me, when all of this was happening, and I was a student when I was dating my wife, and I told her one day, I'll be a millionaire. And this was a very small experiment, because I said, I am made in the image of God and I cannot dream or aim something small. My first job when I got was $120 a month. So, so she said, you have a long journey, and I don't think it is this lifetime that probably you will achieve. But I always believed, there is nothing that I cannot achieve, and since then, I keep telling this. I spoke about this in my TED talk. I keep telling in all the podcasts that we had. My life, I believe, is a life of blessing and grace. So from a very, very lower middle class upbringing in the Indian, my entire household income was, I think, about $210. My dad was a banker and my mom was a homemaker. From there to getting to first $1 million was almost impossible. But believe it or not, I started practicing those meditations. I started practicing those scientific affirmations. I started believing that, universe is listening to us and it will give us whatever we ask for. All that we have to do is think about larger good and long-term good. That's all I believed. That's all I applied. And then, life transformed. I think 8 years from then, was the first $1 million that I made. And I think, I believe in, 100% what you said. We are all made in the image of God and the universe. And
Sure.
That's an amazing story.
Yeah.
And there are people that often will take issue. I take no issue with the term God.
Yeah.
Someone said to define God is to defile God.
Yeah.
It's a great statement. At the same time, some of us mystics and poets and spiritualists, we have to try. And so there are many ways to interpret God. I mean, I have written part of my new book. It says, there are as many paths to God as there are people.
Yeah, it is what you believe it to be, right? It's your own way of expression and belief and worship, right?
Well, it's your personal journey and adventure, and also you are God's expression and journey and adventure.
Yeah.
See? So we all are. I tell people sometimes, many of us like movies or video games because there's drama and enactment and all kinds of experiences. And I said, God must love movies because each of our lives is a complete movie.
Oh, yeah.
Every one of them, or video game, right?
I mean, again, back to Yogananda, what he writes, he says, we are all dreaming in the dream of God.
Exactly.
So did this start with the book, the autobiography of a yogi?
Yeah.
That's what it's called, right? I know I've heard it many times, but I've never actually read that one. It wasn't in my lit studies, so I've got to do it. But one thing I wanted to touch on was that limiting belief. I mean, people are plagued by that. I feel like when I look at someone who's stuck in that kind of wheel that I see so much potential in, or they won't step outside, it's really tragic, right? So how do you get outside of that? What kind of transformation or process do you have to do to be able to see through that?
In my case, I write aphorisms and hope that when people hear them or read them, they can learn something. So I wrote, limitations and doubts are like thieves that come in the night, in the darkness, to rob us of our most precious possessions. And that's our greater self. Within every human being, there's a spiritual and creative giant struggling to break free and attain to fullness of expression. When you were talking about dreams, a very interesting image came up for me. We may not fulfill all of our dreams,
Yeah.
certainly in one lifetime,
Yeah.
but there is almost nothing that we will ever fulfill that we didn't dream first.
Exactly.
So you look at our lives and all the things we do and the things we achieve, you look at our world, look at our cities, look at everything we create
Yeah.
was dreamt first.
But then again, it's also like you discover that as you break outside the box. Some things you can't anticipate, right? You just go for it, and it's the lack of trying to break out that what keeps people in a box.
Yeah.
And so when you go along,
True.
sometimes you accomplish things that you didn't even know possible, right? Because you're freed.
And many people, again, getting back to limitation, they're limited by their environment, by their experience, sometimes their family,
Yeah.
where they live,
Yeah.
how they were taught or raised, or the culture they came up in. But I figured out as a fairly young person that vital people vitalize other people. And eventually that led me to people like Yogananda and one of my spiritual master teachers, Omram Mikhail Ivanov, and a great, great philosopher and spiritual scholar.
Wow.
For 20 years, Manly Palmer Hall in America became my mentor. And I was close with him the last 10 years. There are great, great teachers and teachings here,
Yeah.
Rudolf Steiner was a great, great teacher,
Yeah.
extraordinary teacher. But, then you have Patanjali, you have Shankaracharya, you have,
Yeah.
later Ramakrishna, Vivekananda. You have great teachers and
Yeah.
great souls in India. India's always been blessed with so
Yeah.
many great souls.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But every culture has had them.
Yeah.
The Kabbalists in, the Judaic and Israeli tradition, the Sufis of Islam, astonishing
Yeah.
God intoxicants,
Yeah.
that are just beautiful, that often will say things like, what need have I of titles or labels? Today, Thursday, I'm a Hindu. Friday, I'm a Muslim. On Saturday, I'm a Christian, a Jew, and on Sunday, I'm a Christian. We all breathe the same air.
Yeah.
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 What need do we have of labels and titles?
Yeah.
So that's beautiful stuff. So, and these traditions, of course, they exist everywhere in all societies and cultures. They always had these profound spiritual, deeper inner traditions.
Yeah.
And normally the exoteric is the outer expression of a religion, the esoteric being the inner. I was always attracted to the inner because that's where all the pearls were, that's where all the great, wisdom was, and so on. I remember an aphorism that says, wisdom is the child born of the marriage of the mind and the heart.
Beautiful.
No marriage, no child.
Wow.
No wisdom.
Wow.
See?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's an important marriage we
Yeah.
all need to have.
Yeah.
So, yes, and so I endeavored to take this knowledge, these insights, these experiences, and so on, meditated a lot,
Wow.
for decades and decades, and
Yeah.
got to the point where it's kind of second nature. There's no battling. I'm shocked once in a while where somebody says, oh, to meditate, every time a thought comes up, it's like an enemy airplane, shoot it down and all this. And I'm going, no, please don't put those images out there.
Yeah.
It's not so much about doing something. It's about undoing and not
Right.
doing.
Yeah, and letting
Yeah.
the thought pass without
Exactly.
grasping onto it,
Sure.
right? Like
Yeah.
just let it float over like a cloud. That's a
Yeah.
better image, right?
There you go.
Floating passing clouds.
Yeah.
I wrote a little limerick that said, I seek not to solve the world's riddles. Perplexing and numerous are they. 'Tis simpler, I think, that their answers find me when I am not found in their way. Right? So, those are
Wow.
fun.
This is like.
Yeah,
this is
there's
like
a lot of depth to this
sitting with the
conversation.
sitting with the Rumi of the New Age world. I know a lot of them refer to you as the reincarnation of Rumi, but yeah.
I never made the claim. I said, no. No, I'm in awe of Rumi, and others. Kabir,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and Hafiz, and
Yeah.
Khalil Gibran was an amazing,
Yeah.
20th century mystics. So, but to me, they're like the different colors, the different flowers, the different fruits.
Yeah.
The same with the differences in people, in our ethnicities, our languages, our races, even though there's only one real race, the human race, right? And we are each the cells
Yeah.
in that body collectively.
Yeah.
But the arts, the culture, the food, everything, that diversity is magnificent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't fight over it.
Yeah.
Don't create
Yeah.
distance. And
Yeah.
by the way, the majority of people not only don't and never would. It's usually humanity oftentimes suffers from a very bad case of unenlightened leadership.
Yeah.
Because the leaders oftentimes will exploit the masses, and they use subterfuge and misinformation and so on, and they whip up the differences and the
polarizing. They're
frenzies.
very polarizing. Yeah.
Polarize, exactly. So
Yeah.
we need to put an end to that. 100,000 years of warfare is enough, honestly, and division and separation. Abraham Lincoln here during the Civil War, which was terrible, he said, "A house divided cannot stand." And so I extend that and say, a human being divided cannot be healthy, whole, or enlightened.
Yeah.
And yet we live in an era with a fast-paced lifestyle, information age, communication systems, ideas, all of that, moving at the speed of light. It's true that there are many, many different components to our society that are all trying to grab hold of
Yeah.
a piece of our attention, awareness, allegiance, and resources. So they're all pulling us in different directions. And if someone doesn't have a really strong foundation or center or, awakened and enlivened spiritual core, what we're
hard.
going to end up with is what we have today, more and more and more people with mental health problems because they cannot manage their own lives and they cannot cope with everything that's being thrown at them or being pulled from them.
Yeah, I fully agree with what you're saying, Doug, and I think, I am a no spiritual guru, realized, enlightened soul. I'm a no master to, give any advice, but I have seen this, experienced it, and I have read it, and I know many people who are alive that one solution to most of the problems, or rather, let me put it this way. One thing that I know sure as hell that works in this world is prayers. I believe there is no prayer that goes unanswered, period. There is no prayer that ever goes unanswered. So, I believe it's a Eastern philosophy that I have learned, through Bhagavad Gita, through, a lot of other spiritual books that we read. Upanishads,
Ramayana,
yeah, during our upbringing. So what it says is, there are three things. If your prayer is not answered, then God is making better plans for you.
I like that.
If your prayers are, if your prayers are getting delayed on what you're asking, then be sure that God is creating something which is way better than what you are asking for. And there are like numerous examples in my life itself where, there were seemingly impossible things that happened purely because of the power of prayers. Like I can go, without eating, I can go without, entertainment, I can go without anything, but one thing that I cannot go without is prayers, because I have seen so many miracles happen, that, I feel anything good that is happening in my life is only because of the prayers and the power of those prayers. One such example that I would love to quote is my mom is a patient of cardiomyopathy. It's a scenario where the size of the heart gets enlarged, and the patients are known to not make it too long, when you have that. So my mom had her cardiac arrest when I was in my 10th grade. This is like the year 1998. She had her cardiac arrest, and then the doctors treated her. She had, they diagnosed it as cardiomyopathy, and they said she will probably make it to 3 to 5 years max. She can't survive beyond that period. And only thing that my mom believed was in prayers, and she prayed every single day to God that bless me to live as long as you want me to, and take care of me and my heart. This happened in 1998, and we are in 2024. She is hale and healthy and does everything that's
Wonderful.
yeah. And every time we go to the doctor, and he's like, "You're already living your bonus life. I mean, your expiry date has gone long past, and it's a miracle how you're living." And this is, and this is absolutely. I mean, she's a living proof that who has defied all the medical sciences, and everybody today says, how the hell is this woman alive? And it's purely because of prayers. And yeah,
that's so beautiful. And one thing I'm thinking for like people who might be watching this that feel like, oh, well, I'm not religious, like what about the prayers? Could that be also kind of thought of as just putting that energy out into the universe, regardless of, I mean, if you're praying to whatever God you believe in or whatever religion you have, that's the same as kind of like deciding I'm going to put this energy into the universe, right?
Absolutely.
And manifest that energy and just believe in that every day.